Rachel Martinez had always been different, though she kept that truth buried deep inside her quiet exterior. At 24, she was older than most of the other recruits at Camp Pendleton, having left her job as a high school art teacher in Texas after a violent incident that had changed everything she thought she knew about herself. The other recruits saw her calm demeanor and assumed weakness. They had no idea what she was capable of. The morning that would change her life forever started like any other. Drill instructor Williams called them to the firing range, his weathered face carrying that familiar smirk she'd seen on authority figures before. The look of someone about to teach a lesson to an overconfident rookie. "This one's been giving us trouble," Williams muttered loud enough for the others to hear, hefting a rifle that looked wrong even from a distance. "Figured I'd let our quiet little artist here give it a try." Rachel ignored the snickers from her fellow recruits. She could sense something was off about the weapon the moment Williams placed it in her hands. The barrel felt warped, the sight was clearly misaligned, and the trigger mechanism had a looseness that would send any shot wild. But she said nothing, simply nodded and took her position at the firing line. The target stood 200 yards. Downrange, a standard bullseye that had remained untouched all morning despite dozens of attempts. Williams had deliberately saved the broken rifle for her, a petty power play designed to humble the woman who'd scored perfect marks on every written exam and outperformed half the men in physical training. Rachel raised the rifle, feeling the weight distribution that confirmed her suspicions. The stock had been subtly shortened, throwing off the balance. The scope had been loosened just enough to make precision impossible. Even the ammunition felt light, probably underpowered rounds that would drop short of the target. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting muscle memory take over. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind from those summers long past. "Mia, a rifle is just metal and wood. The real shot comes from within." When she opened her eyes, the world had narrowed to a single point of focus. She compensated for every defect she'd detected, her body making micro-adjustments that seemed to flow from pure instinct. The broken rifle no longer mattered. In her hands, it became an extension of her will. The shot cracked across the range like thunder. 200 yards away, the bullet punched through the exact center of the bullseye. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before Williams lowered his binoculars, his face draining of color. Around her, the other recruits stared in stunned disbelief. Someone whispered a curse under their breath. Rachel calmly worked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing. "Would you like me to try again, instructor?" Williams nodded numbly, his cockiness evaporating like morning mist. This time, Rachel didn't even pause to aim. The second shot followed the first through the same hole, the target center completely obliterated. "Again," Williams croaked. The third shot, the fourth, the fifth. Each one found its mark with mechanical precision, turning the bullseye into a ragged crater of shredded paper and cardboard. By the time Rachel set the rifle down, word had already begun to spread throughout Camp Pendleton. Within hours, her name would reach the ears of people who specialized in finding individuals with very particular skills. People who understood that some talents couldn't be taught, only awakened. But Rachel didn't know that yet. She simply stood at attention, waiting for her next order, unaware that her life had just changed forever. The other recruits looked at her differently now. Where once there had been dismissive glances, now there was something approaching awe mixed with wariness. Rachel had just done something that shouldn't have been possible, and everyone on that firing range knew it. Williams himself seemed shaken, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. He'd expected humiliation, and instead witnessed something that defied explanation. The broken rifle lay on the bench beside him, smoking slightly from the rapid fire, a testament to the impossibility of what had just occurred. As they walked back to the barracks, Rachel's mind drifted to the incident that had brought her here. The day 3 armed men had entered her classroom, and she'd done things with a borrowed pistol that still haunted her dreams. She'd thought joining the military would help her understand what had awakened inside her that day. Now she was beginning to suspect she'd made a terrible miscalculation. The mess hall buzzed with nervous energy that evening, but Rachel ate her dinner in relative peace. Word traveled fast in military circles, and by now everyone had heard about the impossible shots with the broken rifle. Some recruits whispered theories. Family of hunters, secret competition background. Beginner's luck stretched to impossible. Linnets. None of them came close to the truth. Rachel had learned long ago to deflect attention rather than invite it. When approached, she offered modest explanations about growing up around firearms, hunting with her grandfather. Nothing that would raise serious questions. The real story, the one about muscle memory that ran deeper than conscious thought. About skills that seemed to exist in her bones. That story stayed locked away. Martinez. Instructor Williams appeared beside her table, his earlier bravado replaced by something approaching respect. Captain Rodriguez wants to see you, now. The walk across base felt longer than it should have. Rachel's mind raced through possibilities, none of them particularly comforting. Exceptional performance in basic training could lead to specialized assignments, elite units, or deeper scrutiny she wasn't prepared to handle. The military had ways of digging into backgrounds that civilian employers never bothered with. Captain Rodriguez's office occupied a corner of the administration building, its windows offering a view of the Pacific Ocean in the distance. Rodriguez himself was a compact man in his 40s, his uniform bearing ribbons that spoke of multiple deployments and commendations. But it was the woman seated across from his desk who immediately commanded Rachel's attention. "Recruit Martinez," Rodriguez began. "This is Agent Jessica Thompson from the Defense Intelligence Agency. She'd like to ask you some questions about your performance today." Agent Thompson was perhaps 35, with the kind of controlled stillness that spoke of extensive training. Her civilian clothes were expensive but understated, and her handshake was firm without being aggressive. "Please, sit down. This isn't an interrogation, just a conversation." Rachel settled into the offered chair, maintaining the relaxed alertness. Her grandfather had taught her, "Never let them see you sweat, Mia. Fear is a scent predators can smell from miles away." "Your performance today was remarkable," Thompson continued, consulting her tablet. 5 shots, all through the same hole, using a rifle that had been deliberately damaged. Our armorers confirmed the weapon was essentially unfireable by normal standards. The barrel was warped, the sights were misaligned, and the ammunition was underpowered. Yet you compensated for every defect perfectly. Rachel chose her words carefully. "I grew up around firearms, ma'am. My grandfather taught me to shoot when I was young." "Miguel Martinez," Thompson said, reading from her tablet. "Deceased 5 years ago. Former Marine Corps sniper. 2 tours in Vietnam. Recipient of the Bronze Star. Is that correct?" The casual mention of details Rachel hadn't shared sent a chill down her spine. These people had done their homework quickly and thoroughly. "Yes, ma'am." "Your grandfather had an impressive record," Rodriguez interjected. "But even he would have struggled with what you accomplished today. There are Olympic marksmen who couldn't have made those shots under those conditions." Rachel remained silent, waiting for the real question she sensed was coming. Thompson leaned forward slightly. "Miss Martinez, we're not here to cause you problems, but we need to understand what we witnessed today. Have you ever received professional training beyond what your grandfather provided?" "No, ma'am." "Ever participated in competitive shooting?" "No, ma'am." "Any military experience in your family besides your grandfather?" Rachel hesitated for a fraction of a second. "My father served briefly in the army, but he died when I was Young. Car accident. Thompson made a note on her tablet. Ricardo Martinez, discharged after 6 months for medical reasons. No combat experience listed in his record. The clinical recitation of her family history felt like a violation, but Rachel kept her expression neutral. These people clearly had resources far beyond typical military bureaucracy. One last question, Thompson said, setting down her tablet. When you fired those shots today, what were you thinking about? It was an odd question, more personal than professional. Rachel considered her answer carefully. I was thinking about my grandfather. He used to say that a rifle was just metal and wood, that the real shot came from within. And what did he mean by that? That marksmanship isn't just about technique. It's about understanding yourself, your equipment, and your environment. About becoming one with the process. Thompson and Rodriguez exchanged a meaningful look. Rachel sensed she'd revealed more than she'd intended, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Thank you for your time, Recruit Martinez, Rodriguez said finally. You're dismissed. Please don't discuss this conversation with your fellow recruits. Yes, sir. Rachel stood to leave, but Thompson's voice stopped her at the door. Miss Martinez, your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man. You should be proud to carry on his legacy. The words carried weight Rachel didn't fully understand, but the implication was clear. This conversation was far from over. The barracks felt different when Rachel returned. Conversation stopped as she passed, and she could feel eyes tracking her movement. Word of her meeting with the DEA agent would spread by morning, adding another layer to the mystery that was already building around her. She lay on her narrow bunk that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the path that it brought. Here. Teaching high school art in San Antonio had been a quiet life, predictable and safe, until the day the Crimson Wolves gang had decided to make an example of the teacher, who'd refused to look the other way when they started recruiting her students. The attack on the school had lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes of chaos and terror that had shattered everything Rachel thought she knew about herself. When the smoke cleared, 3 gang members lay dead in the hallway outside her classroom, and Rachel stood over them with a security guard's pistol in her hands. The official story spoke of heroic defense of students, of remarkable composure under fire. The unofficial story, the one that existed only in classified law enforcement reports, spoke of precision shots that defied explanation, of tactical awareness that seemed to come from nowhere, of skills that shouldn't have existed in a small-town art teacher. Rachel had enlisted the next week, driven by a need to understand what had awakened inside her that day. The military had seemed like a place where exceptional marksmanship would be valued rather than questioned. Now she was beginning to suspect. She'd made a terrible miscalculation. The next morning brought new challenges. Rachel's training schedule had been subtly modified, with additional time allocated for advanced marksmanship training and specialized fitness assessments. Her drill instructors treated her with a new level of attention that bordered on scrutiny. But it was the appearance of Master Sergeant David Kane that truly changed everything. Kane was a legend within special operations circles, though few people knew his name. He'd served with Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, and various classified units over a 20-year career. Now he worked as a talent scout, identifying individuals with the rare combination of skills and psychological profile needed for the military's most sensitive operations. He watched Rachel from the observation deck as she went through her paces on the rifle range. Using standard equipment this time, every shot found its mark with mechanical precision, grouping so tight they seemed impossible. But Kane wasn't just evaluating her marksmanship. He was studying her body language, her breathing patterns, the way she processed information under pressure. She's different, he told Agent Thompson, who'd remained on base to observe Rachel's continued performance. I've seen talented shooters before, even prodigies. This isn't talent. This is something else entirely. Thompson nodded, reviewing her notes from the previous day's interview. Her psychological profile is interesting too. High intelligence, strong sense of justice, protective instincts, but also compartmentalization abilities that suggest significant trauma processing. The school shooting in San Antonio wasn't just a random event. It was a catalyst. Any family history that might explain the skill set? That's where it gets complicated. Her grandfather was indeed a Marine sniper, but his service record, while distinguished, doesn't suggest anything beyond conventional training. Her father's military service was brief and unremarkable. No other family members in law enforcement or military service. Kane lowered his binoculars as Rachel finished her course of fire. What about genetic predisposition? Enhanced reaction times superior hand-eye coordination? Anything measurable? We'd need more extensive testing to determine that. But David, watch this. Thompson pointed as Rachel began engaging moving targets, her rifle tracking smoothly as clay pigeons launched from multiple angles. Each one shattered in perfect sequence, the shots so precisely timed they seemed choreographed. Jesus, Kane breathed. How long has she been shooting? According to her statements, since childhood, but there's no record of competition shooting. No formal training beyond what her grandfather provided. No explanation for this level of skill. Kane made a decision that would alter the trajectory of Rachel's military career. I want her transferred to my program. Whatever she is, whatever this ability represents, we need to understand it, and we need to do it before someone else notices what we've noticed. The conversation that would change Rachel's life took place over lunch in the base commissary. Kane approached her table with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Mind if I sit down? He asked, though he was already lowering himself into the opposite chair. Rachel studied the stranger. Tall, lean, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in harsh environments. His uniform bore no insignia beyond his rank, but something in his bearing suggested capabilities far beyond those of a typical NCO. Sergeant Kane, he introduced himself. I've been watching your progress here at Pendleton. Impressive work. Thank you, Sergeant. Call me David. I'm not your drill instructor, and we're going to be working together closely if you're interested in what I have to offer. Rachel set down her fork, giving Kane her full attention. What kind of work? The kind that makes use of your unique abilities. The kind that goes beyond basic infantry training and gets into more specialized applications. Kane leaned forward slightly. Rachel, can I call you Rachel? What you did yesterday with that broken rifle shouldn't have been possible. We both know that. The question is, what do you want to do about it? The directness of Kane's question caught Rachel off guard. Most military personnel dealt in euphemisms and protocols. Kane was laying cards on the table with uncomfortable honesty. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Rachel replied carefully. I'm asking if you want to explore the full extent of your capabilities, or if you prefer to spend the next 4 years doing routine infantry work while pretending to be someone you're not. Rachel considered the implications. And if I choose to explore these capabilities, then you come work with me. Specialized training, advanced techniques, assignments that actually matter. But it also means leaving the conventional path and entering a world where the rules are different. Different how? Kane glanced around the commissary, ensuring their conversation remained private. Rachel, there are things happening in the world that most people never hear about. Threats that can't be addressed through conventional military operations. Sometimes, the right person in the right place at the right time can make all the difference. I think you might be one of those people. The offer was both tantalizing and terrifying. Rachel had joined the military seeking structure and purpose. But what Kane was describing sounded like something far more complex and dangerous. What makes you think I'm qualified for whatever you're talking about? Kane smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. Rachel, yesterday you made 5 perfect shots with a rifle that shouldn't have been able to hit the broadside of a barn. Today you set a new base record for precision marksmanship using standard equipment. Tomorrow, with proper training and resources, there's no telling what you might accomplish. Rachel felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. The safe path would be to decline, finish basic training, serve her term quietly, and return to civilian life. But the events in San Antonio had awakened something inside her that conventional military service might never fully address. If I agreed to this, she said carefully, what would it involve? Training like you've never experienced. Techniques that go beyond anything taught in standard military programs. Equipment designed for precision work, and eventually, missions where your unique abilities could save lives that can't be saved any other way. The phrase precision work carried implications Rachel didn't miss. She was being recruited for something that involved more than target practice and routine military operations. I need time to think about it. Kane nodded, standing to leave. Take all the time you need. But Rachel, the world has a way of finding people with your kind of talent, whether they're ready or not. At least this way, you get to choose how that talent gets used. He left a business card on the table, plain, white cardstock with only a phone number and the letters SMU printed in small text. Rachel pocketed it without comment, but her mind was already racing through possibilities and consequences. That afternoon brought another surprise, a visit from her sister Maria, who'd driven down from Los Angeles for a weekend visit. Maria Santos was a paralegal at a major law firm, sharp and observant, and she immediately picked up on the tension surrounding Rachel. You've got people talking, Maria said as they walked along the beach after dinner. My brother says half the base is trying to figure out who you really are. Rachel appreciated the directness. And what do you think? I think you're someone who's been hiding something important for a long time, and now it's starting to surface whether you wanted it to or not. The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Rachel had spent years building a quiet life as a teacher, varying the instincts and abilities that had first manifested during childhood hunting trips with her grandfather. The incident in San Antonio had cracked that carefully constructed facade, and her performance at Pendleton was finishing the job. Sometimes hiding is the safer option, Rachel said. Safer for who? You or the people who might need what you can do? It was a question that would haunt Rachel through the sleepless hours that followed. By morning, she'd made her decision. She called the number on Kane's card. The facility that Kane brought her to 3 days later bore no resemblance to anything Rachel had seen during her time at Pendleton. Located in the mountains outside San Diego, it looked more like a corporate retreat than a military installation. Low-profile buildings scattered among natural vegetation, their design intended to blend seamlessly with the environment. Welcome to the ranch, Kane said as their unmarked vehicle passed through the security checkpoint. This is where we separate the exceptional from the merely talented. Rachel studied the landscape, noting details that suggested this place was far more than it appeared. The security measures were subtle but comprehensive. Hidden cameras, motion sensors, and personnel positioned at strategic intervals. The corporate retreat was actually a fortress designed to look harmless. How many people know about this place? Need-to-know basis. The people who matter know. Everyone else doesn't need to. Kane parked in front of the main building. Rachel, before we go inside, I need you to understand something. What happens here stays here. The techniques you'll learn, the people you'll meet, the missions you'll eventually undertake, none of it gets discussed with anyone outside this program. Ever. The weight of secrecy settled over Rachel like a heavy cloak. What exactly am I signing up for? The chance to become who you were meant to be. The interior of the main building contradicted its modest exterior. State-of-the-art technology filled every corner. Advanced computer systems, communication equipment, and displays showing what appeared to be real-time intelligence feeds from around the world. Personnel moved through the halls with the quiet efficiency of professionals who understood the stakes of their work. Kane led Rachel to a conference room where 3 people waited around a polished table. She recognized Agent Thompson immediately. The other 2 were strangers, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, and a younger man whose casual posture couldn't hide his obvious military background. Rachel Martinez, Kane announced. Meet Colonel Patricia Morrison, retired. Army Intelligence, now Deputy Director of Operations. Captain James Rodriguez, former Navy SEAL, currently our head of tactical training. You already know Agent Thompson. Rachel shook hands with each of them, noting the different ways they assessed her. Morrison with analytical precision, Rodriguez with a warrior's evaluation of potential threat, Thompson with the patient observation of someone gathering psychological data. Please, sit down, Morrison said, gesturing to an empty chair. We have a lot to discuss. The next hour transformed Rachel's understanding of why she'd been brought here. Morrison outlined the existence of threats that couldn't be addressed through conventional military or law enforcement channels, terrorist networks that operated in shadows, rogue states developing advanced weapon systems, criminal organizations with resources that rivaled small nations. The world has changed, Morrison explained, and our response capabilities need to change with it. Sometimes the solution to a complex problem is a single person with the right skills in the right place at the right time. Rodriguez leaned forward. Your performance at Pendleton suggests you might have those skills, but suggestion isn't enough. We need to know what you're truly capable of. Thompson consulted her tablet. We've designed a comprehensive evaluation program. Physical conditioning, advanced marksmanship, tactical training, psychological assessment, and specialized skills development. It's designed to push you beyond your perceived limitations. And if I don't meet your standards, Rachel asked, then you return to conventional military service with a clean record and no hard feelings, Morrison replied. But Rachel, based on what we've observed, I don't think that's going to be a problem. The evaluation process began immediately. Rachel found herself on a firing range, unlike anything she'd experienced. Targets at extreme distances, shooting positions that defied conventional wisdom, environmental conditions that seemed designed to make accuracy impossible. Yet with each challenge, something inside her rose to meet it. Shots that should have been beyond her capability found their marks. Techniques she'd never been taught felt natural and instinctive. It was as if her body contained knowledge that her conscious mind had never acquired. Rodriguez watched from the observation booth, making notes on Rachel's performance. She's compensating for wind conditions she can't possibly measure accurately, he told Kane. Look at her stance. She's adjusting for the rifle's recoil pattern before she even fires. Natural ability or learned behavior? Kane asked. That's what we need to figure out. The physical conditioning portion of the evaluation pushed Rachel through obstacle courses, endurance tests, and combat simulations. Here, too, she performed beyond expectations, her body adapting to challenges with surprising speed. But it was the psychological evaluation that proved most revealing. Dr. Margaret Hoffman was a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma and exceptional human performance. Her sessions with Rachel took place in a comfortable office that felt more like a therapist's space than a military facility. Tell me about the school shooting, Hoffman said during their third session. Rachel had known this conversation was inevitable, but she still felt her muscles tense. What would you like to know? Start with what you remember from the moment you realized you were in danger. Rachel closed her eyes, allowing the memories to surface. I was teaching my advanced Placement art class when we heard gunshots in the hallway. 3 men, armed with automatic weapons, moving room by room. What did you do? I locked the classroom door and told my students to hide behind the desks. Then I waited. Waited for what? I'm not sure. I just knew that hiding wasn't going to be enough. Hoffman made notes as Rachel continued. The security guard, Officer Martinez, came to check on us. He was wounded, bleeding from his shoulder. The attackers had shot him when he tried to radio for help, and then they started shooting at the door lock. I knew they'd be inside in seconds. Officer Martinez was barely conscious, but he managed to give me his service weapon. Rachel paused, the weight of what came next pressing down on her. I'd never fired a handgun before that day, never even held one. But when those men came through the door, what happened, Rachel? I killed them, all 3 of them. Precise shots, center. Mass. Exactly like my grandfather had taught me with rifles when I was young. Except this was different. This was ... This was what? This was like I'd been preparing for that moment my entire life without knowing it. Hoffman leaned forward. Rachel, you mentioned that you'd never fired a handgun before. How do you explain the accuracy of your shots? I can't. That's what's been haunting me ever since. I should have been terrified, shaking, unable to aim properly. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The sessions with Dr. Hoffman continued over the following weeks, each one peeling back another layer of Rachel's psychological makeup. Gradually, a picture emerged of someone whose conscious mind had suppressed capabilities that emerged only under extreme stress. Your grandfather's training was more comprehensive than you realized, Hoffman concluded after reviewing Rachel's complete psychological profile. But more than that, you have what we call stress inoculation, the ability to maintain peak performance under pressure that would incapacitate most people. Kane reviewed the evaluation results with growing excitement. Rachel's scores were beyond exceptional. They were unprecedented. Her marksmanship abilities placed her in the top fraction of 1% of all military personnel. Her physical conditioning ranked with elite special operations troops despite having no formal training. Her psychological profile suggested someone capable of maintaining focus and making complex decisions under extreme stress. But it was her performance on the final evaluation that truly set her apart. The test was designed to be impossible. Targets at 800 yards in shifting wind conditions, using a rifle she'd never fired before, with ammunition of unknown ballistic characteristics. Rachel was given 1 shot at each of 10 targets, with no opportunity for ranging shots or adjustments. She placed all 10 shots in the center ring. That's not humanly possible, Rodriguez muttered, studying the targets through high-powered binoculars. Kane lowered his own binoculars, his face grim with realization. That's what I'm afraid of. The conversation that followed took place in Morrison's office with only the core team present. Rachel wasn't invited. The discussion centered on what to do with someone whose abilities seemed to transcend normal human limitations. The question, Morrison said, is whether we're looking at exceptional training, genetic predisposition, or something else entirely. Thompson consulted her research files. I've been digging deeper into her family history. Miguel Martinez had an exemplary record as a Marine sniper, but nothing that would explain this level of ability in his granddaughter. However, there are some interesting gaps in his service record. What kind of gaps? 6 months of his second tour in Vietnam are classified at a level that prevents me from accessing the details. Given the time period and his skill set, it's possible he was involved in operations that were never officially acknowledged. Rodriguez considered the implications. You think he might have received training that was passed down to Rachel? It's possible. Or there could be genetic factors we don't understand. Enhanced nervous system function, superior hand-eye coordination, processing speeds that exceed normal human parameters. Kane had remained silent throughout the discussion, but now he spoke up. Does it matter how she acquired these abilities? The fact is, she has them. The question is what we do about it. Morrison nodded. David's right. Rachel represents an asset unlike anything we've ever encountered. The question is whether we can successfully integrate her into operational activities. There's another consideration, Thompson added. Rachel's psychological profile suggests she has strong moral convictions and protective instincts. She's not going to be suitable for certain types of missions. Which missions? Kane asked. Anything that involves collateral damage or morally ambiguous objectives. Her motivation for joining the military was to protect people, not to compromise her principles for strategic advantage. Morrison weighed the options. Then, we designed missions that align with her psychological profile. There are plenty of threats in the world that represent clear moral choices. Rachel doesn't need to become someone she's not. She just needs to become the best version of who she already is. The decision to move Rachel into active operations was made that afternoon. But first, she would need to complete specialized training that would prepare her for the realities of the world she was entering. Kane delivered the news personally, finding Rachel in the facility's library where she'd been reading about advanced ballistics theory. "Congratulations," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "You've passed every evaluation with scores that, frankly, have everyone a little stunned." Rachel set down her book. What happens now? Now, the real training begins. Advanced tactical skills, intelligence gathering, mission planning, survival techniques, everything you'll need to operate independently in hostile environments. And after the training? Kane's expression grew serious. After the training, you become operational. Real missions, real stakes, real consequences. Are you ready for that? Rachel considered the question carefully. The path she was choosing would take her far from the quiet life she'd once known, into a world where her decisions could mean the difference between life and death for people she'd never meet. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm ready." But even as she spoke the words, neither she nor Kane could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead, or the way her first mission would force her to confront the true extent of her abilities. The specialized training program that Rachel entered made her previous military experience seem like summer camp. Each day brought new challenges designed to push her capabilities beyond known limits, while simultaneously preparing her for operational realities that existed in the gray areas between conventional warfare and civilian law enforcement. Her days began before dawn with physical conditioning that would have broken most special operations candidates. Dr. Martinez, the facility's exercise physiologist, had designed a program specifically for Rachel based on her evaluation results. The goal wasn't just physical fitness. It was optimization of the neurological pathways that connected her conscious mind to her exceptional abilities. "Your body is already performing beyond normal parameters," Martinez explained as Rachel completed an obstacle course that included precision shooting at multiple distances while maintaining a heart rate above 160 beats per minute. "What we're doing is training your conscious mind to stay out of the way when your instincts take over." Rachel paused at the final shooting station, her breathing controlled despite having just completed a grueling physical sequence. The targets were positioned at varying distances and angles, some partially concealed, others moving in unpredictable patterns. She had 30 seconds to engage all 12 targets with a handgun. Her first shot dropped a spinning target at 50 yards. The second and third eliminated threats positioned behind partial cover. By the time the buzzer sounded, all 12 targets were down, each marked by precise center mass hits. "Time," Rodriguez called from the observation booth. 12 for 12 in 28 seconds. "Rachel, you just set another course record." But Rodriguez's congratulations carried an undercurrent of concern that Rachel was beginning to recognize. Her performance consistently exceeded the parameters of their testing equipment, forcing the instructors to constantly redesign challenges to match her growing capabilities. The afternoon sessions focused on tactical skills that went far beyond marksmanship: urban combat techniques, surveillance and counter-surveillance, intelligence gathering, and infiltration methods. Rachel absorbed each new skill set with the same intuitive grasp that characterized her shooting abilities. It was during the course on advanced surveillance techniques that Rachel first encountered Agent Marcus Webb, a veteran intelligence operative who would become both mentor and complication in her rapidly evolving career. Webb was perhaps 45, with the kind of nondescript appearance that made him forgettable in crowds, exactly the quality that had made him successful in a career spanning 20 years of covert operations. He watched Rachel from the back of the classroom as she demonstrated an uncanny ability to track multiple subjects through urban environments while remaining invisible herself. "She's not just talented," Webb told Kane during a break in the training. "She's operating on a level of situational awareness that typically takes years to develop." "Where does she learn counter-surveillance techniques?" Kane reviewed Rachel's training logs on his tablet. "She didn't. We introduced the concepts yesterday, and she's already implementing them like she's been doing this work for years." That's not normal, David. Nothing about Rachel is normal. The question is whether that's an asset or a liability. Webb's concern proved prophetic when Rachel's first field exercise went sideways in ways that exposed both her capabilities and her limitations. 3 months after completing her specialized training, Rachel found herself on a rooftop in Prague, watching an arms dealer who sold weapons to terrorist organizations around the world. Viktor Kozlov was responsible for supplying the explosives that had been used in a series of attacks across Europe, killing hundreds of innocent people. Rachel's mission was simple: eliminate Kozlov and recover intelligence that would prevent future attacks. The target would be eliminated from extreme range, using skills that few people on Earth possessed. But as Rachel watched Kozlov through her scope, she saw something that complicated everything. A young girl, perhaps 8 years old, who appeared to be Kozlov's daughter. The child stayed close to her father as he conducted his business, oblivious to the nature of his work, but clearly loving him despite his crimes. Rachel found herself faced with a shot that would accomplish her mission, but potentially traumatize an innocent child for life. The dilemma represented everything Rachel had struggled with since learning about her grandfather's hidden past. Her abilities were designed for precision elimination of threats, but the real world rarely offered clear moral choices. Sometimes protecting innocent lives meant making decisions that carried costs she wasn't prepared to calculate. Rachel adjusted her position, waiting for an opportunity that would allow her to complete the mission without the child witnessing her father's death. But as the hours passed, it became clear that Kozlov had no intention of leaving his daughter's side. The encrypted radio in Rachel's ear crackled with Webb's voice. "Phoenix, this is Control. Time window is closing. Execute immediately. Phoenix." Her operational call sign, chosen for her ability to rise from seemingly impossible situations. Rachel sighted through her scope, her crosshairs centered on Kozlov's chest. One shot would end a career of arms dealing that had fueled terrorism across 3 continents. But the little girl chose that moment to look up at her father with obvious adoration, and Rachel found herself unable to pull the trigger. "Control, this is Phoenix," she whispered into her radio. "I have a complication." "Phoenix, there are no complications. Execute the target." Rachel watched as Kozlov lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, the child laughing with pure joy. The arms dealer was undoubtedly a monster who deserved to die for his crimes, but in that moment, he was also a father sharing a tender moment with his child. Control, I'm repositioning for a cleaner shot. Phoenix, you are ordered to execute. Immediately. The target's security detail is converging on your position. Rachel could see the security team moving through the streets below, their coordinated movement suggesting they detected her presence. In minutes, her position would be compromised and the mission would fail. She had seconds to make a decision. That would define not just her future, but her understanding of what it meant to use her abilities in service of something larger than herself. Rachel took a deep breath, centered her crosshairs, and made a choice that would haunt her for years to come. The shot that Rachel took in Prague changed everything, though the full implications wouldn't become clear until much later. Instead of eliminating Viktor Kozlov, she'd chosen to wound him, a precise shot through the shoulder that incapacitated him without killing him, allowing for capture and interrogation while preserving his daughter's innocence. The decision saved valuable intelligence and prevented psychological trauma to an 8-year-old child. It also marked Rachel as someone whose moral compass might conflict with the harsh realities of covert operations. The extraction from Prague had been flawless. Rachel had escaped Kozlov's security team and reached the safe house without detection. Kozlov survived his wound and provided information under interrogation that led to the disruption of 3 major arms trafficking networks. By any reasonable measure, the mission had been a complete success. But Agent Webb's debriefing revealed deep concerns about Rachel's operational decision-making. She's too human, Webb told Kane during a secure video conference from Prague. In the field, there are times when clean moral choices don't exist. Rachel's psychological profile suggests you consistently choose the option that minimizes immediate harm, even if it compromises strategic objectives. Kane reviewed Rachel's mission report on his tablet. The mission succeeded, Marcus. Kozlov is in custody. We have actionable intelligence, and Rachel extracted without compromise. This time. But what happens when she faces a scenario where there is no clean option? When saving one innocent life means allowing 100 others to die? The question would prove prophetic sooner than anyone expected. Over the following months, Rachel completed 7 more missions, each one successful by conventional measures, but each one revealing the same troubling pattern. She would find ways to minimize casualties, protect innocence, and preserve her moral principles, even when doing so complicated operational objectives. Her handlers began to see her not as their most valuable asset, but as their most unpredictable one. Rachel had become something unprecedented in the intelligence community, an operative whose conscience was as highly developed as her tactical abilities. The final mission that would define Rachel's relationship with her handlers came 18 months after Prague. Intelligence had identified a domestic terrorist cell planning an attack on a federal building that would kill hundreds of innocent Americans. The cell was led by former military personnel who had the training and resources to make conventional assault impossible. Rachel's mission was clear: eliminate the leadership before they could execute their plan. But when she arrived at the target location, she discovered something that changed her understanding of everything she'd been asked to do. The terrorist leader was Colonel James Morrison, the same Morrison whose daughter Patricia worked at the ranch. The decorated war hero had been radicalized by his experiences overseas and had convinced 36 former special operations personnel to join his cause. Rachel found herself on a rooftop overlooking Morrison's compound, her rifle trained on American veterans who had served their country with distinction before losing their way. These weren't foreign terrorists or arms dealers. They were soldiers whose minds had been broken by war and corrupted by extremist ideology. As she watched Morrison address his followers, Rachel realized that she was being asked to kill people who were both heroes and monsters, victims of a system that had failed them as much as they had failed it. The shot would be clean, the target clear, the justification unassailable. But Rachel couldn't pull the trigger. Instead, she made a different choice. Rachel spent the next 6 hours documenting Morrison's plans, recording conversations, and gathering evidence that would allow law enforcement to prevent the attack through arrests rather than assassinations. When federal agents moved on the compound the next morning, they found Morrison and his followers surrounded by evidence that made prosecution inevitable. The attack was prevented, the terrorists were captured alive, and the families of the former soldiers were spared the trauma of losing their loved ones to a sniper's bullet. But Rachel's decision to choose justice over elimination marked the end of her operational career. The debriefing session took place in Morrison's office. Patricia Morrison, who had to recuse herself from discussions about her father's case, had been replaced by Kane as Rachel's primary handler. "Rachel," Kane said, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and concern, "what you accomplished was remarkable. You prevented a terrorist attack while preserving the possibility of rehabilitation for mentally damaged veterans. But you also disobeyed direct orders and implemented your own tactical solution without authorization." Rachel had expected this conversation. The mission was to prevent the attack and neutralize the threat. "I accomplished both objectives by changing the fundamental parameters of the operation. Rachel, there will be situations where your approach won't be possible, where the only way to protect innocent lives is to take others. Then I'll find a third option." Kane leaned back in his chair, studying Rachel with the intensity of someone making a difficult decision. "What if there is no third option?" "There's always a third option. Sometimes you just have to be creative enough to find it." The conversation that followed would define the rest of Rachel's career. Kane offered her a choice: accept assignment to operations where her moral flexibility wouldn't compromise mission success, or transition to a training role where she could pass on her tactical expertise without facing the ethical dilemmas of active operations. Rachel chose training. 5 years later, Rachel stood before a new group of recruits at Camp Pendleton, holding the same broken rifle that had changed her life. She'd returned to her original profession, in a sense, but now she was teaching lessons that could mean the difference between life and death. "This rifle taught me the most important lesson of my career," she told her students. "It's not about the tool, it's about the person using it. Today, you're going to learn that lesson for yourselves." She handed the rifle to the first student, a young woman whose exceptional marksmanship had brought her to Rachel's attention. "Show me what you can do with something that shouldn't work." The student raised the broken rifle, sighted downrange at the impossible target, and prepared to discover what Rachel had learned so many years ago, that the shot truly did come from within, and the most important shot was often the one you chose not to take. Rachel had found her way back to teaching, but now she was educating the next generation of warriors about something more valuable than marksmanship: the wisdom to know when precision meant choosing mercy over destruction, justice over vengeance, and protection over elimination. The broken rifle had taught Rachel that perfection wasn't about the weapon. It was about the wisdom to use power in service of protecting others rather than destroying them. And that lesson would echo through every student she trained, every life she touched, and every impossible shot that saved a life instead of taking one. In the end, the instructor who had given her a broken rifle expecting failure had accidentally created something unprecedented: a warrior who had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction wasn't the answer. Rachel Martinez had become exactly what her grandfather's training had prepared her to be: someone who could make the impossible shot when it mattered most, and wise enough to know when missing was the greater victory. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.